much, everyone. Another week's gone by. By this point in time, you probably already know I'm Dave Wood, and of course this is Semiosis 101. So welcome to this special omnibus edition on general Peircean semiotic theory for illustrators and designers. If I need to, I'll introduce myself again. I'm Dave Wood. I'm Scout Scott, a design educator and researcher and a published design author, and I've worked commercially as both a freelance illustrator and graphic designer. And this Scout Scott Semiosis 101 YouTube channel focuses on explaining the semiotic theory of Charles Sanders Peirce in a more design-centric way to visual communication designers, illustrators, graphic designers. And on this Scout Scott Semiosis 101 YouTube channel, I post weekly at least one 10-minute explainer video on an aspect of Peirce's pragmatic semiotic theory. And the aim of these free weekly videos is to take Peirce's quite complex philosophical theoretical language and, using designer-centric terms, put it in the context of designing visual communication, whether these are illustrations, motion, branding, packaging, editorial, etc. In this second omnibus, we have the following 4 episodes back to back, where we delve into Charles Sanders Peirce's pragmatic sign action to reveal how semiosis works, how it can enhance visual communication, and have a sneak peek into Peirce's 10 semiotic signs. Video 1 is enhancing your visual communication with semiosis part 1, and then the second video is enhancing your visual communication with semiosis part 2. Then we move on to another 2-part set of videos, 10 semiotic signs in semiosis part 1 and part 2. It's from this theoretical base that future videos can begin to apply the theory into effective models of semiotic practice that illustrators and graphic designers can then apply. If you prefer to watch the videos individually, you can on this Scout Scott Semiosis 101 channel, or you can stay tuned and watch them all in order in this omnibus. Okay, so now let's begin. Okay, we'll start with video 1, enhancing part 1 of enhancing your visual communication with semiosis. In this 10-minute video, we will expand on the mechanics of sign action semiosis by going a little deeper into how the determination flow between client, creative and audience works, semiotically speaking. Over the next 10 minutes, you will be in a stronger position to understand how the semiotic theory of Charles Sanders Peirce can enhance your visual communication. So, stay tuned, subscribe, and let's get to the first video. Okay, so in previous videos we've explored some of the fundamentals behind Peircean semiotic theory and how it differs from the structuralist Saussurean semiology. And one of the main important factors behind Peirce that, as visual communication designers, I believe is really beneficial is the fact that within Peirce's semiotic theory, it is based upon a triad of the concept to be communicated, how the concept is represented by the graphic designer, illustrator, visual communication designer, and the important thing which makes it triadic is the bringing into that relationship the target audience that the designs are intended to communicate to, visually communicate to, into the semiotic mix here as part of the semiotic journey that Sean Hall in his excellent book, This Means This, That Means That, talks about. Because with it having the triad of how your visual communication is interpreted is a really powerful factor. And Peirce's theory helps designers, visual communicators, illustrators craft and enhance their own visual communication once you understand what the theory is. So bringing this in. Now, in Professor Tony Jappy's excellent book, The Introduction to Peircean Visual Semiotics, he really captures a closer normal language to explain Peirce's complex philosophical language. Tony Jappi is a professor emeritus, I believe, in semiotics, and the book itself isn't written for designers. And when I was doing my PhD and I was looking at Peircean semiotic theory from fresh, and I was finding it very problematic to understand what the language of his sign action was all about, I used Tony's book, Tony Jappi's book, as that bridge between the theory land and designer land. So this is what has really brought me together to do these videos, because the important thing here is to make the translation into designer-centric terms of Peirce's terms. And these three terms are designer-centric terms that overlay as a meta language Peirce's complex terms. So anybody who is a semiotician watching this is why I'm using these terms and not the terms of Peirce, because I'm taking this one step further from Jappi's book into a relevance to graphic designers, illustrators, visual communication designers. So the determination flow that Peirce discusses as part of the triadic nature of semiosis, sign action, how signs work, is fundamentally connected to these three things. The concept that needs to be communicated semiotically, how that concept is represented through visual communication in our case, and then eventually how that is interpreted by the target audience. And effectively, if we've done our job as visual communicators using effective visual communication semiotically, then that interpretation should link back to the intended concept of why we were doing this in the first place. So obviously we are talking here about things that are connotative in understanding. So denotative, it denotes exactly what it is. But semiotic theory helps you connotatively, if that's a word, to explore other ways of being more interesting visually on making the connection of the big themes, the big concepts, and the small concepts behind the reason why you're doing that particular commission that will connect to your target audience. So that's what this is going to be focusing on. Those problematic terms that I've mentioned that Peirce has in his theory, which was written in the late 19th century, early 20th century. The word object is not a problem, but as a designer-centric term, I've replaced the word object for concept. So what we want to try and communicate, the object, from our perspective, within our little bubble of visual communication design, concept. Peirce uses the term representiment, that over the period of time he developed his theory, representiment can also refer directly to the sign in general, but also as part of the actual determination flow. Representiment is his terminology. You won't find that word in any other context other than a Peircean context. He created that word himself, which is problematic in its own right when you start creating words that no one else understands. But he did it in such a way that it could only mean what he meant it to mean. That's problematic as far as us as visual communication designers are concerned, because if you've never seen that word before, it won't mean anything to you. So let's replace that with how the concept is represented through the way we as visual communication designers, graphic designers, or illustrators shape the concept to be communicated through the visual communication we decide upon and the media we decide upon. And then that leads us to the audience. And where Peirce uses the term interpretant about how the image from the representation enters the head of our audience that should connect back to the concept that we started from. So they make that connection just straight away without actually having to really sit down and write treatises about, ooh, does this mean this, does this mean that? They get it. And that's part of the craft of the visual communicator. He uses the term interpretant, but we will be using the more broader concept of how the representation is interpreted by our target audience. Okay, he uses one word where I've used many, but that's basically the gist of how we can use Peircean semiotic theory within visual communication design effectively to enhance our visual communication skills. So let's simplify that down again. We have the concept to be visually communicated, how the concept is represented, that's from us, from our us being the visual communication designers, illustrators, graphic designers, but it brings in through the triad how that representation is going to be interpreted by our target audience who we are designing for. We're not designing for the client, are we? We're designing for our client's target audience. And effectively, we want to get across the intention of the brief that our client has given us. They've given us a design problem. We, through our graphic design and illustration, are finding ways to make connections to our target audience to effectively close that gap back to our clients so that a behavioral change happens within our target audience, that they see what we've designed, what we've illustrated, and make that connection. And they change themselves and go, this now means that, and they make that connection themselves back to the concept. That is effective visual communication, and that is how semiotic theory, Peircean semiotic theory, semiosis, helps us do that. So these two elements are really important. The concept that comes from the client, what needs to be visually communicated, and then us as the visual communication designers, graphic designers, illustrators, how we decide to represent through what we design and what we illustrate that concept. Because how we do that has to connect to our audience. If the audience don't understand what it is we're trying to do visually to help themselves in understanding, take on board what we've designed, then we've lost the audience straight away. So we've got to understand who our audience is and how to visually communicate to them. And this part of the triad of the determination flow is where we enhance our visual communication to effectively do that. And in my argument, Peircean semiotic theory will help us do that, because ultimately we want our target audience to understand what they're seeing connotatively. Okay, so it's not denoting exactly this means this is this. We're showing them other ways through thematic approaches to the visual communication and all kinds of other tricks and techniques we use to get the idea across to our audience. So it's not the hard sell to the audience. The audience are enjoying what they see, what they are experiencing from what we've designed, to then go, okay, this is all about that. Essentially underpinning what Brandon tries to do as well. So all of these things are integral to what we do in designer land, but it's underpinned in what the academics have in theory land. And our chosen academic is Peirce, Charles Sanders Peirce. So in those 10 minutes of Peircean Semiosis 101, we expanded on the previous omnibus video explainer of how semiosis works. In this video, we have just explored in more detail the semiotic determination flow from the concept through its representation to its interpretation. In applying Peirce's sign action to the ideation phase of creative practice, we can see two important things to take note of. A, the semiotic process begins with the client's briefs and the needs of that brief and the conceptual message to the intended audience of that brief. The designer or illustrator constructs a creative outcome that visually represents that message.
Now, by understanding the audiences, visual communicators can craft the representation to connect directly with the intended audience using visual, cultural and social cues. B, the process I've just described is at a macro level of designing or illustrating. Semiosis also happens at the micro decision-making level of designing or illustrating. Before we begin to unpack how that semiotically happens in future videos, in the next video we will bring in a complementary theory that works with semiosis to enhance how we can improve our visual communication. Gestalt. In this second video, which is part 2 of the Enhancing Your Visual Communication with Semiosis, we will focus on how semiosis aligns itself with another theory that benefits visual communication, the Gestalt theory. I'll first outline Gestalt theory in basic terms, as there are other YouTubers such as Tiptus who can give you all a full Gestalt theory explanation. Then I'll outline how Gestalt theory and semiosis can be a powerful team of underpinning theories to enhance the effectiveness of your visual communication. See, by bringing in Gestalt theory to this discussion of Peirce's pragmatic semiotic theory, we open up the conversation to the first powerful set of 3 levels of sign action: iconic, indexical, and symbolic. It will be a double theory-packed 10 minutes of Peirce's semiosis in design essential terms. So, keep watching. Subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell, and let's get to part 2. Today we're going to focus on, obviously, semiotic theory, semiosis, but to get to where I want to get to discuss iconic level of semiotic representation from a Peircean point of view, we will get there via another theory. We're still part of theory land here, and we'll move towards Peircean theory through essentially Gestalt theory. Now, Gestalt is a psychology term, and we use that in visual communication a lot because it helps designers, illustrators, creatives understand the fundamentals of the building blocks of visual communication. In Gestalt, the whole image is different from the sum of its parts. So think about the parts that make up any image or any design. It's made up of multiple parts, whether or not those are lines, circles, shapes, colours, textures. All of these things all make up the visuals that we use to communicate the concept to our intended audience. And what I'm going to be arguing throughout this talk is the fact that those parts are essentially iconic parts, using a Peircean semiotic term. Okay, so there are parallels between Gestalt theory and the fundamental starting point of semiosis, the iconic level of semiotic representation. All right. So let's just, before we move forward, let's just get a little bit of an underpinning of Gestalt theory. Now, there are other videos on YouTube itself that will go into Gestalt theory in a lot more depth than what I'm going to go through. So I'm going to give just an overview of it, but I'm going to shape it through 3 things that I think is important for us as visual communication designers, graphic designers, illustrators to accept. So Gestalt theory itself is based upon the idea that we as humans tend to organize visual elements into groupings. Now, these groupings form unified wholes based on several factors, and those 3 factors I want to focus on here. There's many more, but I'm just going to focus on 3 here. First one, objects will be perceived in the simplest iconic form. And I'm definitely using the word iconic there in a Peircean context. And over the coming weeks, we will explore exactly what we mean when we talk about semiosis and iconic. Okay, there'll be a video coming up in several weeks' time just purely on iconicity. The second point is humans naturally follow lines or curves to understand what they're looking at. And the third point is that human mind will attempt to fill in detail that isn't there. Now, those three things, objects will be perceived in their simplest forms. Humans naturally follow lines or curves to understand what they're looking at. And the human mind will attempt to fill in any detail that isn't there. There are three underpinning elements that Gestalt theory is built upon. I'll leave that to Gestalt theorists to explain better in their videos, but from here, this is where I want to move forward. To do that, I'm going to focus on 6 of the many elements of Gestalt theory that are really relevant to visual communication designers and illustrators. Okay, so let's move on to the first one. The figure and the ground. So these are not in any particular order, but we'll start off with the figure and the ground. If you think about the figure as the elements and the ground as the background, what it's contained on. So here we see a circle. In our context, it's a figure. And the background, which is the bubble background of Semiosis 101. The figure itself is white, and that pops that circle out from the multicolored background. If it was reversed and the background was white and the circle itself was multicolored, again it would pop out from the background. So we've got contrast between the figure and the ground, and both of those can swap around depending on the need from a visual communication point of view of what is important within a hierarchy of elements. Is it important that the figure pops from the background, or the background gives the impression that there's something there, a figure in that background? Okay, so let's move on from where we are with figure and ground to closure. So all I've just done here is coloured that circle red, and you've probably already noticed that I refer to it as a circle, but it's not a circle. It's a circle with a gap. But because I've already mentioned the word circle to you, then essentially you've been doing the second Gestalt yourself. You've been making a closure of that circle, that you see a circle rather than a circle with a gap. So that's closure, the fact that the eye can jump that gap to make it feel like it is a circle, even though we know it's not a full circle. It is essentially a curved line that doesn't meet in a circular way. So let's introduce another element here, and we've got continuation. We can see now that our red circle, and I'll keep calling it red circle because we've already covered closure, we can now see that it's almost forming a figure of 8. So we've got the fact that we've got continuation. So we can see that the curves of the lines, even though one's coloured green and the other one's coloured red, there's a continuation that helps with our perception that this could be a figure of 8 shape, but they are actually 2 shapes next to each other, very close to each other. The proximity are coming together, more about that in a minute. And we've got closure there because there are gaps, but our eye could perceive that as a figure of 8, even though it's not a figure of 8. It's not a number, it's just 2 shapes. So let's move forwards to symmetry. Okay, symmetry within visual communication design, where 2 elements or many elements mirror each other and form a pleasant, balanced point of view. In this case, we've got 2 circles balancing each other out on a diagonal. We've got 2 different colours so that one stands out from the other. So it's not perceived exactly as a figure of 8, but it's perceived as 2 interlinked hoops, maybe. Already we're starting to interpret what these things could be. And symmetry is helping us read what is essentially just 2, I'm going to use the word iconic, rough shapes. Okay. But those shapes have a similarity to each other. And when shapes have got a similarity, then we can read things into this. And as you can see, that by introducing a few more like circular shapes that work on continuity, works on the fact that you got the fact that the closure isn't there, but we can still see the circles, then all of a sudden you got the sense of something is emerging here that we have a way of reading as an audience. We can see and perceive that this is not just random shapes. So, I think you know where this is leading to. So let's go to the final one we're going to discuss within Gestalt theory, which is proximity. Now, by introducing proximity of these shapes that are interlinking together forms this bigger shape, and this bigger shape in our culture has a meaning, and I'll leave that to you to decipher what that meaning could possibly be. There's a gold medal for anybody who gets it correctly. So we have here proximity of all these shapes and colours next to each other in such a way that it gives meaning. So I've been talking about this so far purely in Gestalt theory, but Gestalt theory is just another way of approaching semiosis, and that's where we're going to jump to right now, because all of these shapes you got here in proximity are essentially iconic, because that's all they are. They're just resemblances to circles and curves, and that when you put them together in a particular way, they have a familiarity to a circle or to a hoop or to a ring. And if you put them in a particular colour coordinated pattern, they represent a big sporting event every 4 years. Let's just put it that way. But essentially all they are just lines and colours and shapes. And from a Peircean point of view, that is the fundamental starting point of semiosis. The iconic representation of the concept to be communicated. Now remember, Peirce says nothing is a sign unless it is interpreted as a sign. So these shapes themselves, different colours. If you just go by the colours, there's some of the colours there. You can make all kinds of different country representations from that, because a lot of countries' flags have these colours in them. So, even though the circles, you can put them into colour combinations to create different countries' motifs for representing the country. So these are just basic building blocks of just coloured lines and shapes that we begin to attribute meaning to them when all of a sudden we begin to interpret them as a sign for something else. Intrinsically, they are just what they are, just shapes of colours. It's not until we as human beings start applying meaning, potential meaning or interpretation to the combinations of these shapes that, as soon as that begins to happen, semiosis is beginning. So, just to end today's actual talk on Gestalt theory and semiosis, you can see the fact that where we have really quite complex visual language that represents big events and small events, big things and small things that have value and meaning in our everyday lives, that are visual, they have been designed from the iconic level up. And that iconic level is the very kickstarter from graphic design and illustration point of view of somebody actually beginning to seek the meaning in your work. So if you can nail the iconic level, and that is essentially started in your sketchbooks, as soon as you put a line, a drawing in your sketchbook, a little sketch, you're starting to work iconically without even thinking about it. Because it means something to you, you're putting marks down that will hopefully mean something to somebody else. And that something is hopefully what you want them to take from your imagery, your visual communication. So it all builds up from very basic things that resemble things that we already know. And in that resemblance, that iconicness, we, as visual communication designers and illustrators, we have power to craft meaning with just a few colours, lines, textures. And by using Gestalt theory, that helps us put those colours and lines and shapes, etc., into some forms of patterns that can be semiotically interpreted by our target audience. So that's today's talk over. Come back next week and we'll have another talk where we'll move this forward. So I'm going to leave you on a sort of cliffhanger with what do we mean by iconic, and put a pin in that. Come back to us next week and we will explore what we mean when we talk in semiosis terms, what iconic actually is. See you next week. In the second video of the omnibus, we can now see how Peirce's semiosis theory of semiotics works with Gestalt theory to enhance visual communication in illustration and graphic design. Check out the link in the description and visit TipTut's YouTube channel and video on the Gestalt principles, basics for beginners. Now, this brief theoretical sidestep from Peirce into Gestalt has opened conversation on applying semiosis more effectively into visual communication design to begin to discuss 3 levels of representation of the concept. Peirce uses 3 terms to describe the 3 levels of sign action in semiotic representation of a concept: the icon, the index, and the symbol. These words will have existing denotative meaning for you already, probably. But we, from now onwards, will begin to go deeper into the philosophical structure of the semiotic sign action, and this will mean careful explanation of new terms and insights. In the previous videos, we contextualized visual communication design with Peirce's theory of semiosis through Gestalt theory. So let's now go deeper in this third video into Peirce's language to begin to explain those terms in the context of semiotic sign action with 10 signs in semiosis. In fact, the next videos in this omnibus are a 2-parter where we will take the first sneak peek at Peirce's 10 semiotic sign classifications. The 2 videos are also teasers to future videos which will come out later in the year, where we will explore in more detail Peirce's triads and how these 10 signs manifest themselves in creative practice. To begin that future exploration, first we will see in 10 semiotic signs in semiosis part 1 how Peirce's technical terms can be translated into designer-friendly language. This step is crucial if semiosis is to be successfully applied into our ideation phase to enhance the effectiveness of our visual communication outputs. It's another designer-centric 30-packed 10 minutes of semiosis, so buckle up for part 1. Ready? Enjoying the video so far? Give a like, leave a comment, and let's go to the video.
Okay, so in this video we're just going to explore a bit further the triadic nature of Peirce's semiosis. And just as a quick overview of this, if you come to this with your only understanding of semiotics being the signifier and signified, that comes from the Saussurean structuralist theory on semiotics, which is semiology, which is dyadic in nature, which is basically the signified and signified too. The whole of these videos that are on my channel are focusing on the pragmatic triadic nature of Charles Sanders Peirce's semiotic theory of semiosis. Semiosis is a term he uses for how the sign action or the action of the sign works. And I find that it's a more useful term to explain semiotic theory in the context of visual communication design, graphic design, illustration. So that's the focus of where I'm coming from within this. As I said in previous videos, Peirce's philosophy in regard to semiotic theory, which was written at the same time as, or around about the same period of time as Saussure's was. Peirce is North American, Saussure's semiotic theory or semiology is European. But Peirce's being pragmatic, it's more about the practical nature of how this works. And that is a lot more beneficial as a theory in design, in my argument for this, that the pragmatic nature of the action of how Peirce's semiotic theory works in a triadic nature, in a structure of threes, is really beneficial to visual communication designers, graphic designers, illustrators. But what is problematic is his language, which is very obtuse in regard to accessibility to 21st century designers. In the triadic nature of how the determination flow of how a semiotic sign works, he uses three terms: the object, its representative, and its interpretant, which means absolutely nothing to designers. It may mean a lot to Peircean semioticians and philosophers, but to designers, these three words are problematic. So the whole focus of these videos is to unpack these and replace his terminology with more designer-centric terminology that is more accessible to visual communication designers, graphic designers, illustrators. So in previous videos, we've explored what this triad means. And as designer-centric terms, we've got it down to concept, replacing object, representation, replacing the Peircean term of representative, and interpretation, replacing his term of interpretant. So these three terms have come from workshopping the terminology from Peirce, and myself and a Professor Paul Cobley, semiotician, through a workshop we did with the Graphic Design Educators Network in 2018. These are three words that are more designer-centric that I now use to replace the terminology that has actually been used in Peircean books and by Peirce himself. So these are more designer-centric terms. But in Peirce's language, his triads have more depth behind them, not just the three that I've just mentioned there, but each of those three also has a triad inside of them of theory, from simple to complex structures. Now, I'm not going to unpack what all of these strange terms mean to anybody in this video. They will be subjects for future videos, because most of the videos in the following year will be mostly focused on the object side of things, the concept. How do you represent the context? But you can see here the problematicness of the terminology that only Peirce uses. So these are Peircean words. He created these words to explain his theory, which is one of the barriers immediately to understanding his theory that as designers we need to overcome. And that's where my designer-centric research into how do we do that has led to these videos. So just very quickly, the main triadic nature of the determination flow is object, representative, interpretant, or in designer-centric terms, the concept, how the concept is represented, and how that representation of the concept is interpreted, which leads us back to the concept if interpreted correctly by our target audience. But within each of those levels, within each of those are levels of complexity. So let's just jump to the two big problematic words, representment. There's three new words there: quali-sign, sin-sign, legi-sign. All you need to know at this stage is that within how something is represented, Peirce defines three levels of complexity. How something is interpreted has three levels of complexity. So the three levels of complexity within the representment: quali-sign is the basic level leading up to sin-sign and then eventually to legi-sign. We're not going to unpack them yet. They will be for future videos. In its interpretation, three words there. Only one of those you might have a guess at what it means, but essentially what we have here is rime, dissent, and argument, from simple to complex. Simple, rime, dissent, middle, argument, high concept. I want to draw our attention now to where we start from, which is the concept, the object of why we are creating visual semiotic signs to help our visual communication of the concept, the intention behind the brief our client has given us, that as designers, visual communication designers, graphic designers, illustrators, we do as our bread and butter work in that. Two words within his simple to complex structure that Peirce has used back in the 19th century, early 20th century, now in design has two different contextual meanings in design. And I want to straight away get you to have an open mind and not think that when we see icon and when we see symbol, it means anything to do with interface design, anything that you click on an interface to take us somewhere or whatever. What we will be unpacking in future videos is what these three terms mean to you. And in other videos coming up over the next few months, we will unpack them. To help us as visual communication designers get over our other understanding of what these terms mean, which is not what Peirce means, I prefer to use the terminology iconic, indexical, and symbolic rather than icon, index, and symbol. They're still problematic within those languages because iconic has a different meaning in society and symbolic has a different meaning in society. And indexical is one of those words like it needs to unpack further. So even in using those terms to get away from what we understand in design an icon is and what we understand in design a symbol is, to actually see it in a different context from a semiotic point of view, I'll use these other terms going forward in future videos. So the only thing you really need to think about here is the levels, and that's all you need at this point in time to consider, from simple to complex. In Peirce's theory, we start off with a very simple level of semiotic communication, okay? And these are the ones that's highlighted in yellow. What this means, that's for future videos. But then the next level of how effective the communication is and how that level of communication is crafted, you can see that these middle grounds help you become more focused on how to communicate. How that happens, that'll be for future videos. Can't do everything in 10 minutes. And then finally, the high level of communication, you can see here, is a symbolic level of communication, and within that, these other two terms he uses comes together. Well, what does all this mean at this stage? Since I'm not explaining in 10 minutes what all these strange terms mean. Well, in Peirce's semiotic theory, he was a mathematician as well as a philosopher. There's a lot of maths behind his pragmatic theory to help explain science. That's one of the remits of Peirce's philosophy, is how it can be applied to science. But we're not science, we're design, we're qualitative. But basically, just bear with me on this one, that Peirce defines 10 levels of semiotic signs from the very, very basic simple at sign 1 to the very complex at sign 10. So in Peircean semiotic theory, he defines 10 levels of signs in which the sign action is constructed between those three triads of concept, representation, and interpretation. But each of these are using the theory to enhance itself in different ways for different purposes from sign 1 to sign 10. Now, I've purposely kept it simple at this stage, but in the next few slides, I'm going to show you, and it's only to show you the complexity of Peircean semiotic theory that over the coming videos, I will translate into more manageable graphic design, illustration contexts that you don't have to be a professor in semiology, a semiotic professor to actually make any sense of this before you can actually use it. So I'm going to basically, in these videos, unpack all of these things over the coming years. Okay, so let's just have a quick look to see what all this means. Well, first of all, what we talked about before about the iconic signs, the very basic level of how to represent the concept are here in the purple. The next level up, indexical signs, are these four at the bottom of this inverted pyramid. And then the symbolic signs are the last three in this 10 signs. So what all does this mean to you guys? Keep watching this channel to actually get more and more of this information over the coming month.
So that ends part 1 of a two-parter that introduces a big idea into the ongoing conversation. 10 types of semiotic sign, from very simple to very complex. Now these 10 signs are a big theoretical jump, but remember, we are in the realm of fairyland here and not off the shelf ready to wear land. So these 10 signs should not be thought of as a checklist or a simplistic gradation that can be instantly selected and used as if they are a set of different size spanners. Where this video takes us on our semiotic journey is to a place where we can view the exciting expanse of semiotic possibilities to apply semiosis into our creative practice. Now, we ended the third omnibus video on iconic, indexical and symbolic semiotic signs. So like any great adventure, we begin this exploration one wee step at a time. In this final omnibus video, we will explore the basis for these 10 signs in more depth, from simple to complex. We will take small steps and explore what the iconic, indexical and symbolic semiotic signs can be. In this second part, we will just begin our understanding of why Peirce defined these 10 signs, and why for now you creatives don't need to be flummoxed by Peirce's academic terminology. You see, I want to positively blow your minds in this video with the powerful potential of Peirce's sign action of these 10 semiotic signs, and to prevent your mind being blown up trying to struggle with Peirce's problematic philosophical terms. The potential of semiosis to improve your visual communication skills outstrips any terminology to open up your ability to apply Peirce's semiotic theory into your commercial creative practice. You see, the trick is to synthesize the theory seamlessly into your ideation phase by doing rather than tripping over the terminology. And that is why I make these videos, to help you over the obstacles of Peirce's terminology. This will be the last theory-packed 10 minutes of semiosis in design-centric terms in this omnibus. All great rewarding journeys begin with the small steps, so come and join me on your next small step to enhancing your visual communication skills with semiosis. Subscribe, hit that bell, and let's go.
Okay, in this video what we're going to focus in on is a sort of like continuation from the previous video about what Peirce defines in his theory about 10 semiotic signs. I mentioned in the previous one about the complexity of his language. So if you want to check out that video first before coming to this video, that might make a bit more sense, but this video is a self-contained video and we'll take this a little bit further. Okay, so in this video, we're going to focus as just an explainer about what Peirce classifies as the 10 semiotic signs from simple to complex. Okay, so if you look at it from the perspective of what we've been talking about so far, which is about the concept, what Peirce calls the object of what we are going to be visually communicating, which is based upon a triad. So the dissemination flow goes from the concept to how it's represented and how that representation then gets interpreted by our target audience. And hopefully, if we've done our job correctly, semiotically speaking, how we have represented the visual communication will help our target audience make connection back to the concept that is in the brief that we've been briefed on as designers, visual communication designers, graphic designers, illustrators, to actually achieve. So all of these things are intertwined, and this is the context that we're talking about in Peircean semiotic theory in regards to a higher level of thinking, which is how we can do this utilizing 10 semiotic signs. Okay, it's a lot more complex than I first make it sound, but the important thing here is to understand what we mean, first of all, by iconic signs. An icon is not the same as an icon in interface design, the icon that we press as a button to take us to another page in an interface. It's not the same as what we use in popular culture when we say, oh, that's an iconic building. It's not about that. This is the unfortunate thing about when Peirce wrote this theory in the 19th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, words change meaning. So part of my task here is to get you in a frame of mind that when I talk about iconicness, it is nothing to do with about any other use of the word iconic in popular culture. It is about how iconic refers to a particular state of the concept through how we represent it within Peircean semiotics. So as long as you're with me on this one, let's continue. So an iconic sign is the very basic level of how we visually communicate semiotically the concept. And that iconic sign is embedded within 3 signs of Peirce's 10 signs from simple to complex. Indexical, I will talk about indexical in future presentations because that needs unpacking. But if you think about your index finger, that's the clue. It points at things. So that's all I'm going to say at this stage. Come back and watch future videos to understand what indexical semiotic representation means. But here, there are 4 out of the 10 signs that are indexical in nature, that point to the concepts. And then the last one is symbolic. And again, the word symbol, we're used to the word symbols nowadays within interface design, within the interfaces that we use on our smartphones, etc. But when I talk about symbolic signs and symbolicness, it is in the context of Peircean semiotic theory. And these will all be unpacked in future videos, so come back and catch some of those. We can't do everything in 10 minutes. So we've got these 3 levels of how our concept can become represented effectively. Iconicness, very basic level. Indexical, mid-level of importance. And then the higher level of visual communication is the symbolic nature of things. And now what I'll quickly do is just take you through, from a Peircean semiotic theoretical point of view, his terms. And I'm not going to explain what the terms actually mean, but you can just see the problematic nature of the language that Peirce uses in his writing, which bears no resemblance to what we use within visual communication design. And even those words that we do understand, that we do see, are not what we think they are, because they have different meanings in semiotic language. So at this point in time, this video is just there to explain ahead of time, almost like a taster ahead of time, of how Peircean semiotic theory, despite the problematic nature of his terminology, has the potential to really enhance how we as visual communicators craft the visual communication that we do within our graphic design and illustration to connect with our target audience, back to what the client hopes you are doing within the brief. So all this language you see in these 10 signs, through these videos that I put together, I'm going to be translating all of this into designer-centric terms to help you make the connection to how Peirce can really, really help you up your game through visual communication to become more effective communicator to your target audience, which will make you more employable from your clients who want to communicate to you. Okay, so that's basically the focus of today's video, which is just to get you to a point where you understand the difference between what Peirce writes about, which is very, very technical language, that language he creates, and how these videos that I put together through this channel will help you, as a meta language, help you make connections to that richness of his theory, so that you can actually, with confidence, begin to apply that theory into your own design.
That was our last 10-minute video of Peircean Semiosis 101 Omnibus for now. In a single diagram of an inverted pyramid, you now can see the range of semiotic signs ranging in power and each focusing on a different form of communicational situation. At the extreme points, we have the most basic form of sign, sign 1, and the most complex, sign 10. But each sign in itself has a varying power to communicate based upon the active sign-action combination of how a single sign utilizes the relationships between its concept, representation, and interpretation. The determination flow between the concept, representation, and interpretation relies on how each of those crucial elements interact with each other. Now, this ebb and flow of interrelationships is controlled by each state itself having 3 levels of determination, from simple to complex. To begin to explain this in more designer-centric ways, in next month's Omnibus video collection, we will begin this exploration by examining how the concept is represented over 3 levels, from simple to complex. Yes, next month's Omnibus focuses on unpacking iconic, indexical, and symbolic representation. If you have enjoyed this Omnibus, then please like these videos, subscribe to this channel below, and if you want to be notified when the next video hits YouTube, hit the bell button. As a fellow creative and a published design author, I have a link in the description to my Scout Scott website, where you can also see the latest weekly Semiosis 101 video, and you can also read the Scout Scott blog or browse my illustrated and typographical gift ranges on my Redbubble shop, or find and buy my 2014 design book published by Bloomsbury Publishing, Interface Design and Introduction to Visual Communication in UI Design. You see, over the years I have collaborated with other design academic researchers and Peircean semioticians to develop a designer-centric explanation of Peirce's theoretical language. If you are interested in reading my semiotic Rosetta Stone academic writing, then you can visit my academia.edu link in the description. Any other books on Peircean semiotics or design I've mentioned in the videos are also listed in the description. Check them out too. By subscribing to the Scout Scott YouTube channel, you will learn how semiosis, Peirce's pragmatic semiotic theory, can help to enhance how you visually communicate. Now, I do have many more piercing semiotic topics to discuss on Semiosis 101, but I'd be interested in hearing about your semiotic thoughts too. Add a comment below. And if you like this video, check out my other weekly semiotic videos too, and consider liking and sharing those videos with others. Thanks for watching this Omnibus. There will be another Omnibus edition next month and a new weekly 10-minute Semiosis 101 video next week. But check out all the other Scouse Scott Semiosis 101 videos, like and share them with your friends. You can also follow Scouse Scott on Instagram and Twitter using the @Scouse_Scott name. And don't forget to hit the bell button to be notified when next week's free Semiosis 101 video is published. So see you all again next week for another 10-minute Semiosis 101 video to help illustrators and designers to enhance your visual communication skills.